The Matthew Dark Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, praise God and welcome in. Two major issues we want to delve in tonight. First, let's start with the escalation in Iran. Of course, February 28th, the war started, bombs started dropping, the Ayatollah was killed, the schoolgirls were killed, war was on. And very early on in the process, there was an overexcitement to get to a deal to make peace. Trump did not want this to drag on now as long as it had. He's not been as close to peace as he's indicated in many press conferences. So we're now coming to, we're at a point of escalation, not de-escalation. And how do we know that? Well, we have 13 consecutive days of bombings by the U.S. into Iran. Iran, of course, retaliating against Qatar and Bahrain and Kuwait. And now we've lost service members over there as a result. So we have a serious escalation, and it has to end worse than we are right now. That's becoming very clear because escalation from both sides is now the only way forward. You can't back out and leave now if you're United States. So we look at Trump's now next move, knowing that he didn't want to do this in the first place, knowing that we had Epstein files sitting right there for the public to chew on, and we needed to get off of that subject like immediately. And that's what he did. And so we got into it. Of course, we've heard so many conflicting reports about, well, why did the war start? How did we get into this position? And of course, Marco Rubio told us right after the bombings, the day after, that Israel had a planned attack against Iran and that Iran would be bombing military assets of the United States in the Middle East. And of course, they did. So Marco Rubio then says we preemptively took a strike on Iran so that that wouldn't happen to our military folks in the Middle East. And so, of course, we've lost an additional four members of this military just in this recent week of bombings, and they were flown back. President Trump there, of course, greeting the dignified transfer. Just an awful shame. And we know those deaths were for nothing. And that's what makes our hearts kind of like, we told you so. We're going to lose more because President Trump has also indicated he wants to expand the war that would include ground troops. And so if you think about ground troops going into the islands, all those islands and military oil resource centers for Iran, Kurg Island being the main one where they're shipping all of their oil. Now, of course, the ships have to go there to pick up the oil. The coast along Iran, it's too shallow for those monsters to come through. Now, remember, 20 million barrels a day go through the Hormuz Strait. And that is now a standstill. It is shut down. It is still closed. Now we have the Houthis in Yemen saying that they are also going to block a strategic strait, blocking that strait. So you have 20 million barrels a day of oil now at risk of not returning anytime soon, because part of the expansion of the war that President Trump is talking about is taking out energy resource centers, taking out bridges, taking out highways, taking out the meats and guts of Iran. That's where he has said this is going, and up to include U.S. troops on the ground in the Middle East again. And we know we were just there. We were just there from 2001 to 2021, 20 years, $2 trillion, well over 2,000 dead soldiers, plus everything that happened on 9/11. So the track record is not good in the Middle East. Iran is something that we have never even contemplated taking on. Little tiny Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan and those parts of those have shown to be a death sentence for any invading country. Yeah, I guess you won in Iraq. You killed 1 million Iraqis. You hung Saddam Hussein, and then you turned it over to chaos. Same thing happening, of course, in Syria. And all these places where we go stick our hand in somewhere it shouldn't be. But unfortunately, now we're in, and there's no pulling back now. Iran has no incentive to negotiate with the United States, and there's no reason to believe the United States and Israel will keep their word on a peaceful Middle East, because Israel can't. Now, Israel government officials have cited they are not interested. This was their minister of finance in Israel. He indicated they are not interested in joining a full-on attack in Iran, but that if the U.S. wants to do that, that's fine, because of course that's good for them. So we're going at it alone, even though we got in on Israel's behalf. We're going to have to finish it on our own. And then you have an election coming up in November in which the stakes are so high for conservatives, stakes are so high for President Trump's freedom and presidency, because we know what'll happen when power flips in January next year. And you could argue it doesn't even matter that Republicans have control. They have control of the White House, Congress, they have the Supreme Court, and they're getting like zero done for the American people, right? That's a major problem. So now you just lose one of those wings and you have a real problem. And in the House, we know Donald Trump will be impeached on day one if Democrats get control. You could argue that this time around, just looking at the Epstein cover up, looking at the Iran invasion, you could argue that they have maybe some valid reasons. This could go further than it did last time. And of course, remember Trump's first couple of impeachments. You had a Republican Senate that, of course, he was impeached, but it was never going to get a conviction in the Senate. And this time could be different. It's not going well, of course, in Iran because we have escalation, not de-escalation. We have to now move forward with more aggression in the region. And that's exactly what he said he wouldn't do. No new wars. Well, we're in the middle of a war, and it was unnecessary because whether you believe Marco Rubio's story or Trump's story, that is every week, every day he gets in front of a camera, Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Meanwhile, we have China stealing elections, as reported by the president just last week. And I guess that's a great question to ask the American people. What's a greater threat to America? Iran having a nuclear weapon or China meddling and fixing our elections? I mean, I think the answer is obvious because we got Joe Biden. We got 20 million aliens that came over here. We got enormous debt. We had mandates on vaccines. Thank God they were overturned and that those people did not, because so many were injured. It's still such a hot button topic. The COVID shot, it is amazing how much passion still exists in support of the COVID shot. I am blown away when I get just some of the nastiest feedback. Whenever we dare touch the idea that maybe not all vaccines are safe and effective, you say that online, watch out, watch your back, because there are fans of these vaccines that are ferocious. I mean, they'll crawl over broken glass to defend every single vaccine on the schedule. And it's crazy. So, of course, Joe Biden was going to make everybody take it, and that got overturned. And of course, then we had the miserable withdrawal from Afghanistan. We lost 13 more service members, left all that equipment, and put terrorists back in charge of that region. So we have no room to speak. We have a very tough set of circumstances coming because, see, the stock market has also been playing this game that this Iran war is no big deal. The loss of energy is no big deal. And it is. And so they're going to have to pay attention to that. We've been sort of surviving this fake economy on a very inflated stock market. I mean, my goodness, Dow 50,000, give me a break. $6 trillion, $5 trillion, massive mega market cap companies, all AI, have basically taken Wall Street to levels that, you're going to lose your breath at. And so that has a time tick on it. It is going to come to a ferocious end for stocks and equities. And it has to. Stocks need to correct, and they need to correct significantly more than 10%, especially a behemoth like this market that has absolutely done nothing but straight up. That's happening while energy is getting more expensive. National average is back up over $4 already. And again, we're just getting started in this new escalation of the war. When ground troops start going, when Kurd Island cannot get any oil out, when the 20 million barrels of oil per day are now not ever coming back, where does that get made up? And it has to get made up in less supply. And so prices are going to go up as a result. Trump and Secretary of War, we should have known war was coming when we changed the name to that. Shame on me for not picking up that. They wanted to do this, and this was probably already part of the plan. Pete Hegseth gets this nice, new, cool military job, and he wants to use his toys, wants to use all this $1.5 trillion a year military budget in the United States, which is outrageous. $1.5 trillion for what? Why on are you telling me that there's not 1.5 trillion of problems right here in the United States that wouldn't be solved like instantly with 1.5 trillion? We're sticking that into the military. And of course, inside of this budget for next year is the language of the merging of Israel and United States military in regards to AI, weapons manufacturing, data and intel. This will be a bond sealed forever if this passes. And of course, it did just pass in the House. The gutless, cowardly Republicans in the House all voted, except for 7, all voted to merge the United States with Israel. And now let's just step back. If you're a Trump fan And remember, three-time Trump voter, so guilty as charged. But he has made no comment about Section 219 in the NDAA for 2027. No comment at all, which tells me he's not allowed to comment on it, or he is for it, but just knows how unpopular it is to dare mention that the United States, 330 million people, and a $1.5 trillion a year military is going to join forces with a little bitty tiny country of 9 million in the Middle East with no resources, which has nothing to offer us. They'll say it's all for intelligence. Where were they on 9/11 for that intelligence? We needed that intelligence on the morning of 9/11, the days before 9/11, and they didn't come through for us. So we can't say that it's worth that. This is a $1.5 trillion military. So we don't need their little. So this has been forced upon President Trump. That's why he's not speaking about it. All these people voting for it are AIPAC recipients. So they've been also told to vote for it. There's probably no way it can pass in the Senate. You'll get John Fetterman's vote. John Fetterman has said he'll basically die for Israel, whatever it takes for Israel. That's because he receives Israeli Jewish money. And so that's what you say to your, nice uncle that gives you a nice wad of cash. You do what he says. You're very grateful. Can you come back for more? And he'll give it to you. But he's going to ask more and more of you each and every time. And that's what AIPAC does. That's what Israel does. That's how we got into Iran. They've pushed and pushed. And so the president isn't even speaking about one of the most treasonous acts Congress has ever committed, to merge the military resources of the United States and Israel. And of course, Israel buys our stuff, steals our stuff. How on earth could they be of value? But you know what happened, of course, is that Senate and Israel and AIPAC and that whole wing, they could tell that the tide had shifted dramatically in America in their support of Israel, right? So if you look at the younger kids, 18 to 35, like 16% say I'm in for Israel. They have no interest. It was our baby boomers that were 2/3 said, whatever goes to Israel, I bless. They're good people. That's what they said in the baby boomer range. And they're losing all the support below the boomers for Israel. So what makes that go away? Well, we can't trust the American people to come back around. So we'll just put it into law and basically make it an unseverable relationship with the United States and Israel. And that's a betrayal of the American people. And if you just kind of go down and we look at the betrayals that have taken so far under this new Trump term, and of course, three-time Trump voter, that's why we're so disappointed. This was supposed to look so much different. This was supposed to be, wow, America is now the 1950s. The dream is alive again. We're going to kick out all the invaders, all the 20 million that came over here illegally. They're gone. We're going to get working on inflation. We're going to catch all these Epstein perverts. We're going to put them in jail or hang them. We're going to weed out all this waste and fraud and corruption that's coming out of Congress. Of course, we discovered all this fraud in the USAID and Elon Musk's work. We discovered all this, and nothing happened, of course. But we thought this was great. We're going to get America back and do this again. And it's gone almost in an opposite direction. And to suggest that this merger is not a stab in the back of the American people, that there's really not one that tops it at the moment. The betrayal of the Epstein files, unforgivable at this point. Unforgivable at this point. President Trump is really pushing for Todd Blanche to be confirmed because he knows that will go away for good. And I still don't know what they plan to do, because at some point, President Trump loses control of the Epstein files. Somebody else has got control of the Epstein files. It's a different AG, a different president, a different Senate, different Congress. And so that's going to be someday. And so are they just burning it all now? That's not going to be recoverable. It's agreement that this is going in the incinerator, never to be looked at again, because we know what's in there. We know every time there's a black line over a sentence or a name or some kind of comment, we know that that's incriminating evidence, and there's millions of redactions. And so that means there is so much evidence behind so many men that hurt children. And Donald Trump continues to play cover up of the whole thing. And it kind of puts some of these, it's weird. If you think about it like this is very interesting. Make it make sense in your mind. But you've had on the right, of course, the left does not care about the Charlie Kirk case at all. Not interested in that. And nobody believes it anyways. But let's just go with the Tyler Robinson, shot Charlie Kirk, killed him, crack shot from 150, granddad's 30-06. On the right, if you say, yeah, but that doesn't make any sense because his shirt puffed up and he went the other way and that bullet would blow his head off. So we're just like, it doesn't make sense to us. We're asking questions. Okay, that's one group. And then you have the group that says it's done. Lance Twigg said he did it. His mom said he did it. We've got this grainy, fuzzy, itty bitty, tiny camera angle of him doing it, jumping off, doing, so if you don't go with that on the right in these days, then you're basically a Democrat. You're a scumbag. How dare you do this? And Erica Kirk is the bravest woman, God ever made. I mean, if you don't go with that, you're somehow a bad guy on the right now. But when you think about it, that's like a Jack Posobiec kind of a guy who says, I was in the courtroom, he did it. Okay. Came out and gave his press conferences and just said, got his check, and then went out and said all these things to the American people that were, of course, now a lie, because we've had contradictory testimony that the other witnesses that were in the courtroom, and they said you couldn't see that at all. Why would he make that up? You could not see a figure, a face. You couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman. And we're supposed to go along with, it was Tyler Robinson, his boyfriend, and his mom said he did it. So end of story. We don't need a trial, even just hang the kid. Okay. So if you're not going along for that and you're not doing that, you're a bad person. Jack Posobiec, though, was also a part of the Binder crew. Remember, Pam Bondi did her famous Binder release. This was going to be all this file and new information on Epstein. Give it to the podcasters, let them get it all out. And it turns out it was already publicly available stuff, meant nothing, did nothing. But right now, the Donald Trump side of the Republicans believes that the killer of Charlie Kirk is Tyler Robinson, and that the Epstein files are in fact a hoax, a Democrat hoax, even though they were celebratory of them getting the binders, and they were going to basically spill the beans on all these bad people. And so that doesn't fit, right? Because Epstein files are not a hoax, they're real. And that's why it's such a big deal here in America. And Charlie Kirk's killer was not Tyler Robinson with a 30-06 from 150 with granddad's gun that he assembled up on the roof, took apart, jumped down, put it back together, had a Dairy Queen, and turned himself in. That did not happen in this case. But those are contradictory because, see, Epstein had co-conspirators, and this is not Tyler Robinson as the murderer of Charlie. Those are both true, but they don't fit on the right. There's going to be a lot of conflict if you say, yeah, okay, Epstein should be prosecuted, but don't you dare say anybody but Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk. That's the behavior. And so what's that cause? No way Republicans can win another election at this point. Can't happen. And these aren't going to go vote for Democrats. Are you kidding me? Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, those aren't serious choices. So of course you can't go be a Democrat, transition little children into another sex, open the border, DEI. No, of course you couldn't vote for a Democrat. So it just means you stop voting. You have no interest. It means your vote doesn't matter. And clearly you can tell it doesn't. We said no new wars. Can't do new wars. We said work on inflation. The economy's gotten more expensive and it's only going in that direction. We said we had to have justice on the Epstein files. And you covered them up. You weren't allowed to do that. We're your employer. Remember, Donald Trump works for you and I. We don't really take our proper authority in that, but you're the taxpayer. So you fund this country and you elect its leaders and you call the shots. It's actually how it works. And believe it or not, the Declaration tells us that a government like we have right now is actually supposed to be torn down, start over. It's gotten off course. It's gotten off track. It's gotten too big. It's gotten too corrupt. And the Declaration actually says you can fix that. You take them out and you start over with a proper government. And it's just government isn't for everybody because eventually the power's just too much. The lure of money's too much. The lure of promotion's too much. And you'll do anything, sell your soul. Doesn't matter. Sell it for a bunch of dead Gazan children, a bunch of dead Ukrainian people. Now, of course, we talked Iran war intensifying, and that's true. And now we have Russia, Ukraine intensifying, and that's very, very true and much scarier and kind of what it looks like. When they talk about World War III, how does it start? Well, this is what it looks like, where you have major countries in major conflicts simultaneously. That's going to pull a lot of players in. And so we have that brewing, and this is the opposite of a no new wars president. This is the opposite of a rhino, neocon, establishment Republican. Those were all supposed to be gone. We're going to replace it with this great agenda, make America great again, America first. All these things, and we've gotten like reverse 180 on it. We're going opposite. We're expanding the military. We're expanding our overseas reach. We're increasing inflation. We're doubling down on corruption. I mean, President Trump made $600 million on his little coin, his meme coin. He rug pulled his fans and voters and made $600 million on his coin. That should bother his fans. What in the world is going on that a sitting president could make that kind of money? And remember, we were all upset about the Hunter Biden paintings. He was getting 250,000 a pop for, like little kid stuff. And we said, that's so corrupt. They're buying influence. And Donald Trump is milking and snatching from his own fans. His sons are doing the same thing, investing in drone companies. They have a head start on all this stuff. We know his family's made money shorting stocks, shorting oil, buying tech stocks, stocks like Dell Computer. He's made $1 billion as president. That should bother his voters. As we're getting pinched, see, he made 600 million on a meme coin. Are you kidding me? And so we have all-time corruption. We have all-time cost. We have all-time disconnect between government and its people. Here we're saying, we don't want to be that close with Israel anymore. Please stop. What do? Write into law, basically a permanent relationship that you can't really get out of. You're going to have to find a new Congress to vote it away. And that's not going to happen anytime soon. This is going to be a permanent thing. So now when they want to go into Turkey, we got to help them. Now, when they want to finish the job in Lebanon, well, we got to help them because intelligence says, data says, AI tells us that this is best done this way. And we're going to take out Lebanon. We're going to give it to Israel. And then we're going to give them Jordan and all these places. They want a massive swatch of land. And that's what this has been about primarily. And unfortunately, the United States has just suckered along, just played along. What do you need? It's a blank check. We love you, Israel. And so you have a major problem, a major conflict on the right, as you have a drooling, ferocious left that wants power back. And they're going to get it. They're going to get something in power coming back soon. And it just shows nothing got done with Donald Trump. You can't go back to the first Trump term and say we had a lot of accomplishment. We spent most of it under impeachment. And he was so naive, he didn't understand how government worked. He got played as a fool a ton of times. He allowed Jeff Sessions to recuse himself in the Russia thing, and it froze 2 years or more of his presidency. And so he was feel good. We felt better because we weren't doing all the homosexual stuff. We weren't doing all the trans stuff. We weren't doing the DEI. I mean, none of that stuff was on the table. It was make America great again. And you felt like, if we could have just, and then we had COVID and only negatives for the country came out of COVID. Of course, a lot of people woke up. They got wise after COVID. They saw that these drug makers are just putting whatever they want into these things. They're not being tested, that the FDA is actually making money off of these drugs that they're saying are safe and effective. We saw inside the classrooms during COVID with the Zoom schoolings, and we saw the LGBTQ stuff, and we saw the filthy books and all of this stuff. And so there were some blessings, but as a country, it really hurt the country. And that was under his leadership too. Of course, we had the great George Floyd case. Speaking of George Floyd, now this is a really smart move. I want to say it. Could this be the case? Trump's original voters that were all in on Make America Great Again, healthy again, get the corruption out, drain the swamp. Remember, that was a great slogan from that first campaign, drain the swamp. I wonder, and I'm thinking this myself as well. Would you allow the Epstein cover-up to go on? Let it just stay. So would you allow the Epstein cover-up to just stay where it's at, and President Trump completely pardons and frees Derek Chauvin, the cop that they framed for George Floyd's death? Of course, George Floyd huffed a bunch of fentanyl and drugs in the car. He couldn't breathe. Derek Chauvin was trained in the prone position. That's exactly the textbook. So his own boss went up and perjured himself and said, we don't teach this. When the Minneapolis Police Department could absolutely produce a document that showed this is the position you're to put the criminal in at this point in the arrest, questioning, interaction. So he was framed for it, and there was no suffocation. There was no murder. It had nothing to do with that. He couldn't breathe in the car. Let's face it, George Floyd had heart trouble, drug addict, convicted criminal. he was not the pillar of health. So he had an exciting event. He was caught, of course, trying to use a counterfeit monies. He just, poor son of a gun, he just never figured it out. And then Derek Chauvin, wrong place, wrong time. And the other cops, too, that went to jail. But I guess that's the question. Would you trade the Epstein cover up? Fine, cover it up. And Derek Chauvin is released. And just to see what that would do to the culture. Because if you remember what George Floyd, what it did to the culture, holy cow, we're burning down places, we're killing people, we're doing the things like in Seattle, where we have these closed societies, no cops, no rules. You want to talk about a terrible year, 2020. COVID and George Floyd, are you kidding me? And then, of course, in November of 2020, you get the fake, stolen, completely compromised mail-in vote that produced somehow 81 million votes for Joe Biden. And of course, nobody believes that number. And of course, there's plenty of evidence to show voting irregularities or where laws were broken in state constitutions by judges of states that began to accept, yeah, you don't have to have signature verification. We'll accept it much after the deadline. Of course, everything was COVID. You couldn't do a thing right during COVID. And so we got Joe Biden and then the invasion and just kind of a rotten, icky stain on America. But we're heading back to something even worse than imagined. So Joe Biden, when it was Kamala Harris running, the thought of her being president felt devastating for the country. A person that you can clearly see, you would not hire her to manage a Target or a Wendy's or any of these kind of places. And, a cackling person, a person that slept her way up to the top. Of course, she had an affair with Willie Brown, the San Francisco attorney, and then she became DA. And then, of course, she moved up into Senate. And of course, she was mixture, not black, like Indian and something else, Jamaican maybe. But of course, making up stories about her ethnicity. And of course, they all feel like the more color they put in there, it's going to be better for them somehow. But of course, we're judging character with the fruit of your character. We don't care what color you are. What's the substance in you? And so, of course, these people have no substance and they behave that way and they show it openly. And so the country was potentially going to elect, an 83-year-old Joe Biden and or Kamala Harris. And so those aren't choices. Those aren't serious candidates. And of course, this is a major country that can't just be run like it was under Joe Biden. And so when Trump does this now with the Iran war, the problem is that this is going to be the presidency is dealing with Iran. And if he can even see to the end of his term here. And I really believe that there's no way he finishes his term, that he has to eventually have that presidential pardon from J.D. Vance. He can't have any exposure to the Epstein files once he loses control of them. This Iran war is going to come back up and haunt him as an abuse of the War Powers Act. He's not seeking approval from Congress. And so when you put a peace deal together, you could do that here. And that's why he was so eager to want to sign these deals, because he knew he was getting deeper and deeper into this 60-day period that he had to where he did not need Congress's approval. So you do Iran, you do the Epstein cover-up, you do kind of the insider trading, the potential financial crimes that he's committed or his family has committed. He and his family are going to need full pardons. There's no doubt. They'll need a Dr. Fauci style of pardon in which there's no crime yet, but we know you're going to be charged with a crime at some point because of your conduct. And so we're going to give you a nice big blanket pardon here. And so Trump will have to have that. And then, that's the sad thing is, this has all been about his ego and his image and this idea that, nobody tells Donald Trump no. Nobody can tell Donald Trump what to do. And I think we're finding that's the exact opposite with Donald Trump. I think he's being told what to do all the time. And he's been told to do very bad things that would hurt Americans. And the Iran war is becoming, just a complete. It's probably going to be the thing that ruins his legacy. I think he can get away with the Epstein cover-up. I do. Because so many people on the right, they just don't care. I mean, you're an idiot for talking about Epstein. People on the left would prefer to protect those friends, donors, allies inside them. They're not going to ask for that to come back up. But when you start sending soldiers back in the flag draped coffins and you think, what in the world was that for? Vietnam rings a bell. Makes me think Vietnam all over again, to think that we were going to somehow go over there, defeat communism, or anywhere communism pokes its head up, the United States is there to kill it, and of course, some really horrible presidential decisions back then, and Trump making some very similar ones. I mean, the idea of putting U.S. troops in harm's way in Iran for a nuclear bomb that never existed is one of the cruelest things I could think a president could do, because he's going to be welcoming home more dead bodies when you put troops on the ground. We know that. That's how it works here. And we know that we lost 2,000 or more in Iraq. And so Iran, being a country of 93 million, a much more sophisticated and larger military than Iraq, and of course, Afghanistan. And we lost all these people, all these soldiers that were sent over there for literally nothing. It was to go get terrorism out of the region. And when we left, terrorism was welcomed back as the leaders of those areas. And so we lost soldiers as a result of that, shameful as a result for that. President Trump said, you're a stupid, talking to Obama, he's going to get us into a war with Iran, and he's stupid and this, and he's gone and done the very thing he opposed. And so you can't get out of the no new wars one. We have to now really accept that that was a betrayal. Okay, fine. Don't count Epstein, but the Iran war now moving into full scale, which you'll have no choice. You can't just go tit for tat. This thing's going to drag out forever and ever. And if he's still in the middle of a war come November, I mean, you could see an enormous shift in January in which he's now potentially impeached. I mean, you understand, if the Congress flips to Democrats, he's toast. And so he steps down, gets the pardon, and moves on. Okay. You have to think that's coming for President Trump. You have to still stand back and say, why on earth would you risk it all for Iran and Jeffrey Epstein? And that's what he's done. And it's going to be his demise. And we're so prayerful that something will change in his heart. Come into his heart, Lord, and change his thinking. Because as it stands right now, this is going to be a term he can't finish, and a term that will truly live in infamy. We'll forget about Joe Biden. We'll go back to that Trump second term, and look what happened to America under that second term. And again, 3-time Trump voter. And so we're sickened by it. We're prayerful for it, but we're certainly now reaching a point of no return in Iran. The NDAA Section 219 that would put Israel and U.S. together, that still has to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. 60 votes needed. Now, I could see them doing a filibuster break for this one because it has Israel's best interest, but they wouldn't do it to do the SAVE Act, which prevented fake voting from taking place all over this country. So I think it's the time America, though, really pay attention. It's not Democrats and Republicans. It's we, the citizens, versus these, 1,000 pigs in D.C. that run everything. When we figure that out, I know you like trans, and this one over here likes his guns and hunting, and forget all that. You understand that they're coming after you and me. They don't care about either one of us. You do understand that now. That has to be the sentiment hitting the American heart right now, and act upon it. We can't play these games anymore. They've taxed you to no ends, and they're pushing the inflation to no ends. They don't care. They're rich. Inflation doesn't hurt the rich, helps the rich, right? And they're not worried about corruption. They're going to keep doing it. They're doing it right in front of your face, and nothing happened. Okay. They should have gotten a riot for the Epstein cover-up. Crickets. And defense. Some Trump fans defend it. So this has to change 911. We'll be back tomorrow. Do this until the next time. Serve the Lord Jesus Christ. Tell a friend about him. Stay good. God bless everybody.
The Matthew Dark Show, your one-stop show for truth, courage, fellowship, and faith. Available everywhere you get your podcasts.